if you want to rebrand, we're about to get into the steps. We're about to get into this is what you need to do first, and then you do this. And with that said, we've already talked about making sure that you internally reflect, like the consideration of maybe doing a podcast. And he said, not just because you want to do something new. And he said, maybe they're scared to get into the work that really matters. And why am I always needing to tell people what I do is a thing that shows that you might need to do a rebrand. He talked about with his show, it was called Creating a Brand, and he's changed that to Podcasting Made Simple. He had SOPs, but it was misaligned. And so he had to figure out how to do this. And so it's like, why am I really doing this? And is there actually a reason for it? And if there is, let's dive into the step-by-steps. Alex, what's first?
Yeah, man, I'm excited about this. Like, again, this is a new topic for me to get to cover. No one's ever asked about it, but it's been a big part of my life, as you said. So to me, that pre-step, again, like doing that internal reflection, consideration phase, right, is so important. The next thing to do is talk to the person that you serve. Who is it that you're actually serving? Who's that avatar for your business, your brand? And if you're like, well, I have a podcast about this, an event about this, and all these other things in between, talk to each of those people and see if you can find any sort of alignment on their end. And I always think it's best to put it on somebody else before yourself, because we lie to ourselves without meaning to, right? We're like, oh, but like I like this color, so the logo needs to be a different color, right? And the reality, when you talk to the person who's buying from you, they're like, I really don't care what color the logo is. The product's great. So you're like, oh, wait, I should actually spend more time on the product, not the logo, right? And so you have to really stop and think about all these type of things, but from the perspective of the person that you serve. And so again, if you feel like, okay, I do have a lot of things, talk to all of them. Take tons of notes. Do your best to really communicate with them every chance you get to just see, is there any synergy here? Like, can I figure out how to put these two things together? A great example is Adam here. Adam serves podcasters, the podcast about podcasting, right? But the people that he attracts are business owners, successful entrepreneurs. So it's kind of merging those two things together. And the reality is podcasters and business owners are not really a niche, but when you put the two things together, now you got somebody that you're serving, right? Like that's a specific person. That's a business owner that either wants or has a podcast. And so when you do that, it takes it to a different level. And he's able to merge those two worlds. So it's a beautiful example that you have. And so for us, again, we've got to start with talking to people, collecting the data, learning what we can from them, because that's going to be what helps us understand, okay, this is the direction if I'm going to do a rebrand that needs to go in.
Yeah. Okay. So step 0, reflect on consideration. Step 1, talk to the avatar that you serve. Don't make it up on your own, but actually give them a poll, ask them. What do you do after that?
The next thing is going to be to actually get strategic with it. So I like whiteboards. I use whiteboards initially for the stuff. It ends up on a computer, but I like having whiteboards to basically, okay, this is what I think I'm learning. Here's all my things, right? And here's where the connecting dots happen. Here's what I keep on hearing people say, but that doesn't align with this brand, this one. It's to get really strategic. And for many of us, strategy isn't necessarily one of our skill sets. And if that's the case, find a friend, family member, a coach, somebody that you trust to come in and basically help you vision board this thing out of like what it could be. Because if you skip this step and you don't get into the strategy, you're just like, okay, I'm definitely rebranding. I'm just going to do this. I feel like you're going to be doing it again in a couple of years, right? But if you say, hey, let's really sit down, let's look at this thing for 5 years strategically, think about the direction we're going in, keeping in mind this person we serve who's already given us all this information, where does all this fit? And so to me, that second step is really just sitting back doing the strategy. Listen, I'm a strategic person. That's sort of one of my, I guess if you look at like strength finders, that's one of my, I think it is my top strength is strategy. But I still bring somebody in anytime I'm doing this because I don't just want to trust myself, and that outside perspective is so helpful. And so a great example of this is just like what Adam did with me earlier, talking about like, hey, why don't you basically have a call to action to get access to the Q&A that was part of the event in your podcast? I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. It's because I didn't have the right person probably help me on the strategy side. Make sure you get that right person though and think strategically. So that to me is that second step. The third one goes right along with that. So I'm just going to roll into it here. The third step is to find the proper verbiage, the way to present what this is that you're doing. And again, maybe find some help. AI might even be able to get you a little bit of the way there, but basically honing out how you're going to describe what you now have as your strategy. So again, you've decided you need to do the rebrand, 0, right? 1, you've now talked to the people that you're serving. 2, you've developed the strategy. 3 is now to get it really crystal clear from a verbiage standpoint, what it is that you're doing. And that doesn't mean you need to call your podcast the podcast about podcasting, right? Not necessarily, but it needs to somehow articulate what it is that you do and how it serves that person. And if it's your company, or it's like, hey, maybe this product needs to go away, we'll rebrand it into this. Maybe that's something that you need to do. But this is the time to really get clear on the verbiage, because as I learned with Pod Talks going to Podcasting Made Simple Live, I went from tons of questions to no questions. And that's because now I was able to figure out the right words to use that my world really understands well. Those are some of the initial steps, definitely. And there's a lot of work in between this, but yeah. And by the way, it's the podcast on podcasting.